Hello, everybody. Scott Golden with the TNT Review Pro Wrestling Logic, and we are going into the end of November, right after Thanksgiving, oddly enough, of 1984. This audio is going to be about the November 27th, 1984 edition of TNT, and it's a relatively kind of noteworthy edition. Jumpstarts a couple of things, and maybe I'll tell some stories on another audio when it's more appropriate about one of the stars here because I've had reasonable interactions with Tony Atlas, Mr. USA. He used to work New England Independence quite a while through the 90s, actually ran an independent for several years, would take work wherever he could get it for a while. This was before the MTV I'm a Pro Wrestler, so had many interactions with Tony. And looking back at this, it just makes me sad because Tony's featured here. And had Tony not gotten involved with drugs, I really wonder could he have been a the first black world champion for WWF at the time? Could he have been an Intercontinental Champion? Probably not. I mean, his issues with Rocky Johnson notwithstanding, I think maybe he was too southern, but at the same time, Tony was so talented in his prime and just losing so many years to drugs. For those that don't know Tony's story, he goes homeless for several years. Woman finds him when he's homeless, brings him home with her, and later marries Tony. And Tony gets his life back together. It's a great redemption story. I've been meaning to read Tony's book, but that's one of the things I'm going to do. Anyway, but we open the show, and Tony displays some art. And for those that think, oh, it's fake and it's just a put on, no, Tony can blankety blank blank, because Family Channel, draw. Tony is a talented artist, always was, and he did it so naturally, man. Like they show this again on Legends House, but I'd forgotten how really talented he was because I haven't been around Tony in, oh gosh, 15 years probably. But in any event, just he's super talented with caricatures, almost like a Jerry Lawler in that way. And he does caricatures and he does nature scenes. And he does all sorts of fun things, and they're highlighting it here. He takes on Gino Carabello, as you would imagine. Press slams and power moves and body slams and all sorts of things. But one thing that I think people misunderstand or devalue is Tony's agility and his finesse. Tony could move for a bigger guy. Tony legit was somewhere between 250 275 most of his career, and he moved like a cruiserweight when he wanted to. Now he didn't do that later in his career, and by the early '90s, his WCW run, and then the later '90s when he's independent, he isn't there. But man, at this point, I think he could have been a completely whole nother level star. So he addresses the Paul Orndorff thing. He's humble. He says he's Mr. USA. He's won multiple bodybuilding contests. Then we actually see him do some posing to try and get under Mr. Wonderful's skin. Calls Mr. Wonderful Paula, which may be the first time that I remember a major star doing that. Of course, they reactivated it in WCW, but I wonder if it started with Tony here. I know fans did it, but I think Tony Atlas was the first major star to have done it on national television anyway. Correct me if I'm wrong in comments below. Um, and then we see the other side. Paul Orndorff is here. He is livid and he is aggravated that, he's sent in tape after tape and he doesn't get any respect, and he thinks that he should be able to fight Greg Valentine. It doesn't matter. They're both in the same locker room, is how he put it. But translation, we're both heels and it shouldn't matter. He says Hogan's ducking him. Just a really cool bit of bit of information here. Quick draw Rick McGraw. Again, Orndorff, not my style of guy in ring. I have not seen him enough in other territories to say I just don't like his WWF stuff at the time, or he's just not for me. He's very basic, punch, kick. The pile driver he uses is probably one of the best of all time. I'm still partial to Lawler. I'm a Lawler pile driver guy, but Orndorff probably has the second best pile driver of all time. Um, Although I like Terry Funks too. Who's got your favorite pile driver? Comment below. Um, in any event, Orndorff actually does a segment on the pile driver, and he talks about how dangerous it is, and he doesn't care if he hurts people, and he's going to obliterate whomever gets in his path, and those type of things. I mean, he's an arrogant heel, and I've heard people say that Paul is that arrogant in real life. Never met the guy, can't comment, but I've heard multiple people say it, so maybe there's something to that. He then discusses how disrespectful the fans are, and how they don't understand him and they don't value him, and it's annoying. We then move on to Vince McMahon dining with Rene Goulet. Goulet makes several pastries and French dishes. Goulet mentions Vince keeping him on the road, not being able to be around not being able to be around his wife enough, and the wife then later in the program gets involved in the cooking. We then move into a magic show. The TNT really showing itself to be like a nighttime vaudeville show, but anyway, the magic thing doesn't really fit, but it fits with what TNT was at the time. We move into a carpenter match or squash match for Rene Goulet, who years later, even a couple of years later, would move into an office position for several years. Oddly enough, it seems I remember him being the target of the Ultimate Warrior a lot of times. If you want to see Rene as a agent, you can see him getting beat up in the Royal Rumble pose down. I believe you can see him getting puked on by the Warrior in the Ultimate Warrior Papa Shango vignettes from '92. I'm trying to think if he's anywhere else. I think he also is in the Ultimate Warrior getting buried in the casket from '91 vignettes. I think Rene Goulet is in all of those. Someone can go check me and tell me if I'm right or wrong on that, but I seem to recall him being part of all that. Then we see the wife of Rene Goulet cooking for Vince and Alfred Hayes. We move into Rocky Johnson versus Moondog Spot. Again, Rocky phenomenal even in 1984. I don't know how many more years. I think he's only in the ring maybe full-time 2 or 3 more years, but most of it internationally. Matter of fact, I think they bring it up in commentary here, he's willing to go to places that most people won't go. Translation, he's willing to take money most people won't fight for. And he's going to Kuwait, which they say at the time was a reasonably docile country. How things would change in less than a decade. The spoiler talks about his mask and his reputation, talks about how WWF in New York is the place to be, but that he's not intimidated. He basically puts McMahon in his place when McMahon tries to question him. Of course, the spoiler, Don Jardine, big in Texas, big in the predominantly southern territories, Georgia, Texas, and the like. Really agile, big guy. Does the flying clothesline that Undertaker would later use, also does the rope walk that Undertaker would later use. We go back to an interview with McMahon at the desk. Spoiler says he will load the mask, he will cheat, he will do anything to be number one, doesn't matter what it takes, he'll get it done. And then we go to the final segment of the program, which is the pose down, which had been challenged earlier by Tony Atlas to Paul Orndorff. Pose down between Orndorff and Atlas, which then leads to a brawl between the two, closing the show. Someone in comment, and I mean no disrespect, I get how hard it is to be a bodybuilder. I have people that are figure competition folks that are clients of mine, and I mean no disrespect to you, but for fans of bodybuilding, could you explain to me in comments below why you're a fan of this stuff? I get that it takes discipline. I get that it's a personal journey thing. I get that it's fun to look at for like 30 seconds. But for folks that are fans of it, why are you a fan of that particular sporting activity? Love to hear from you. Anyway, we'll continue with more of these later today. Once again, Scott Golden reminding you, keep your feet on the ground, your mind in the moment. Till next time, everybody.